Okay, there we go. Thank you and welcome to our 11 Days of Global Unity Summit panel on human rights. We're excited to have with us Callum Cintron, Shannon Crossbear, and Larissabolivar. My name is Rick Ulfik and I'm the founder of We the World and the We campaign at we.net. And I'm the co-creator of 11 Days of Global Unity with my dear friend Troy Lush. And I want to thank Jim Garrison and Rick Buckley, along with Ubiquity University and Humanity Rising, for broadcasting all of the 11 Days of Global Unity Summit panels. You can find out about all of these 11 days broadcasts and events by going to we.net. And we invite you to collaborate with us as a volunteer or an organization partner as well, since these 11 campaigns go all year long, not just during 11 Days of Global Unity in September, they go all year. So to collaborate, just go to we.net. Okay, let's bring in my co-host for today. Callum Cintron is the coordinator for We the World's Campaign for Human Rights, the Human Resources Director for We the World, and Callum also leads our social media team. And Callum does this all while going to school, if you can imagine that. Welcome to the broadcast, Callum Cintron, and please set the context for today's discussion.
Thanks, Rick. Today, we're going to hear from some Indigenous folks and people who work with Indigenous communities about local Indigenous issues and how others may help with those issues and creating a platform for those voices to be heard. We're going to hear from Larissabolivar. Larissabolivar is the founder and CEO of Bolivar Hemp Company, a farm-to-table hemp skincare and wellness legacy brand with operations based in Choteau, Colorado. She has 20 years of leadership in the cannabis movement and is historically recognized trailblazer and pioneer of the cannabis industry in Colorado. In 2003, she founded the Colorado Compassion Club, which became the first documented medical marijuana center in Denver, Colorado. Pre-regulations, and dissolved in 2008 after years of police harassment following a raid and racial discrimination. Ms. Bolivar has since developed a prolific career in cannabis and marijuana and hemp. And I will let her talk more about that, but I also want to introduce Shannon Crossbear. She expresses her commitment to healing through her work in the world and her own community, and family history propelled her to develop leadership in order to address disparities that have led to poor outcomes for friends and relatives. Shannon's work has included facilitating consulting with the National Indian Child Welfare Association, Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health, Georgetown University, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, and a Surgeon General Conference on Children's Mental Health. She has worked with tribal and non-tribal communities in providing technical assistance to systems of care and circles of care, utilizing traditional interventions and promotion of culturally congruent and trauma-informed policies. And Larissa is having a bit of technical difficulties, so we'll go to Shannon. Shannon, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and your tribal community and the work you've been doing with the different communities near you?
Sure. As soon as I had a little camera trouble there. Well, first of all, I just want to say, Minagishikad in the way Maganak. I just wanted to greet you all as my relatives today. That's something that I want to always do to remind myself that we're all related. So I really thank you, Callum, for inviting me to, to this day that the theme is on the human rights. And I was lucky enough to kind of hear the opening for the day and got to think about some things there for that at that point in time. And so I'm really, really looking forward to this kind of conversation about human rights and about, I was thinking, you people can see there's water behind me represented. And I was thinking about human rights and how, you know, kind of the first and most fundamental human right is life. And then I was thinking about the water, because without water, there is no life. And so I am, all of this stuff is so interconnected and interdependent. So when we think about human rights, we can't actually divorce that from the rights of us, all humans, right, to live, and what we're dependent upon to do that. So I wanted to just kind of put that out there. I also think about human rights. I think you were talking about kind of specifically about our indigenous population across the world, because within our indigenous populations, and my belief is that at some point, if you go back far enough, we're all indigenous, right? But just some of us are further removed from that ancestral knowledge. But we as human beings were put on this earth, you know, that we do have a purpose, that we are the two-legged, that we are, that part of that purpose is to care for our life, right? Our life and the life of all things. So, so when I think specifically about the human rights in this country, which is a, you know, wants to be a beacon for others in terms of human rights, right? That until we kind of deal with the human rights that this country ignored and was founded on, it makes it kind of difficult, right? So it's not, and I'm going to say that not from a place of blame or shame, but a place of, we have to recognize that human rights at the very foundation of this country were not put in place, even though they might have been written. They weren't afforded to everybody. And so kind of, you know, but where we're at now is how do we then move forward and think about those human rights today, both here and other places. And, you know, kind of specifically about the issues you mentioned before, Callum, about the issues of the fossil fuels and what it's doing, but not just what it's doing to the earth, but it's no mistake that one of the biggest kind of social issues that has come out of that is trafficking and disrespect of women and girls and, you know, all of that, because they're both, right? It's the same thing. If you're willing to do that to the mother, you're willing to do that to all the sisters and daughters, right? And so it's, you know, that's no mistake. And, you know, one of the things that you said earlier today, Callum, that really made me feel very hopeful in your desire to be an ally for human rights of all kinds, right? Is just this understanding of openness and reciprocity, and not coming from a place of being above in any way, or, you know, a helper. One of the things that I've seen happen, which is not through ill intent, I've seen really, really good people wanting to do good things come into communities and absolutely do more harm than good. Not from intent. I mean, I've seen this, but because there's just a fundamental shift that needs to take place that has to do with those kind of components of understanding and respect, and really true understanding of what that means. And I say that because, many of our, tribal communities are very impoverished. And in one of the most impoverished reservations in this country, I know that they have put millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of dollars into that community. And yet poverty remains. The social things that are happening remain. In fact, they're actually getting worse. So what do we, so all that idea about what we think is helpful is not helpful. And when folks are told that, helping people to get to a point where, I think that's why, in terms of our human rights, there's something we have to get deeper into our hearts about, because until we get to that point where we can have those conversations and get to truth telling and then to some reconciliation, we're going to continue to see challenges that we have with human rights and treating each other, in a way that supports life, whether it's here on this continent or across the world. Just recently, I was thinking about how we could not, how we think that something that's happening somewhere else is not affecting us, and just, getting us to understand that. So Callum, was very hopeful to hear your thinking and how that has been informed over time in the fields that you've worked in anthropology and those fields, to really begin to shift the thinking about what it means to tell the story, right? So thanks for having me, and glad to be here. And I see we have our other guests joining, so I'm excited to hear. So.
And before we go to Larissa, I wanted to mention a couple of things. So Shannon, you were referring to the earlier conversation where we were talking to Callum, and just so folks understand that each of these 11 days, we're not only doing these summit panels on each of the 11 themes, like today is human rights, but we're also doing a kind of a tribute to the people who've been helping to roll out these 11 campaigns for We the World. And that's what we were doing earlier. And all of these are available to watch after the fact. If you connect through we.net, you can find our YouTube page, which is wetheworld.org, and the Facebook page is the We Campaign. But I also wanted to ask you, Shannon, what is the latest with what was going on about the trying to stop the pipeline? I think it's the Enbridge pipeline, if I'm not mistaken, correct? In Minnesota, near where you were. It kind of dropped out of the news headlines, but I know that there's a lot going on there. So what updates can you give people about that?
Well, they're still holding the line. And, there has been a march that went to the Capitol to again bring attention. But it's no mistake to me that we have to actually fight to have access to what's happening, right? It's not readily available. Just as you said, it kind of dropped out. It didn't drop out by accident. It dropped out because, we don't want to talk about what is happening. We do not want to, I say that in the collective, acknowledge that these are women and grandmas and daughters and aunties that are holding the line for you so that you can live. And nobody's talking about what's happening to them, getting arrested. It's continuing. It's continuing today. It hasn't stopped. And we have not stopped what is happening. And this is where we need that call. And the grandmas have been making the call. They've been making the call to come, to pay attention, to hear, if you need to come hold the line with them. And if you can't do them that, then to support them in other ways, to help elevate that story, to get it out there. You can go to Honor the Earth, our food sources, not my food sources, although yes, my food sources, wild rice is being affected, the rice beds, but your food sources. This is all connected to the bread belt of this country, which then trades with other countries. So thinking about what is happening there is, it's not a little bit of news and it's not a sideline, it's a headline. And thank you, Rick, for, for allowing me to say that.
Yeah,
For
I think
giving me a platform for that.
totally. And it's such a shame that our mainstream media puts these things in categories. And I heard that earlier today. A commentator was saying, well, progressives think that that we should put through this big budget that Biden is trying to get through to help with climate concerns. So it's like, what? It's not the people who are experiencing wildfires and floods and hurricanes and droughts, and so it's only the progressives who care about those things. And it's the same thing here with the pipeline and the water protectors. They're talking about the survival of all of life on Earth. It's not just a niche subject. So thank you for bringing that out.
Yeah, and I wanna say this because it's so important that we collectively have to create the sense of urgency that this requires, and to create that sense of urgency without a sense of panic. And I say that because we could very well be panicked. Maybe we should be panicked. But the problem with panic is that it freezes us in place. And we either come out fighting, which doesn't really work very well, or we just stay in place. And so having that sense of urgency means that we do shift what we pay attention to, and that we shift our way of giving in, which is what we is doing. We're elevating these things in a way that unfortunately our embedded mainstream systems are not. And we all, whoever's watching this, they can hit that button, they can share it, they can tell their friends and relatives. I always used to think when I was a little kid, I used to, I was a great believer in prayer. And so I would go, before I'd go to bed at night, I would pray for all my friends. And then I would pray for all my friends and all my enemies and all my relatives. And then I figured that wasn't enough. So I'd go back and I'd pray for all my friends and all their friends, enemies, and relatives, and all my relatives and their friends, enemies, and relatives, and all my, so, and by that time I figured I pretty much had, a good percentage of the world covered. So, anyway, I'm the things that are happening with, Ubiquity University, with what we're doing, elevating all this work that's being done. These are the things that can help promote. We just need to keep doing it, right?
Yep, definitely. So do you want to bring in our next guest, Callum, Larissa? And Larissa, you changed your name. Perfect. That's what I was wondering. Good. So go ahead, Callum.
Yep. So as I mentioned before, Larissa owns a hemp company. So if you'd like to talk about that and your work, go ahead. Oop, you're still muted.
Thanks. I'm not the most technically inclined. Thanks for having me. I also live in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. So if I have some technical issues, that's why. But so my name is Larissabolivar. I am originally from Washington, D.C. My family on my father's side is Ojibwe, Chippewa from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And then my mom remarried and I was adopted by my Peruvian dad, who is Inca Quechua Indian and was also raised within that traditional family environment. So I represent North and South Native Americans, I suppose. And I've been in the cannabis space for 20 years, working on the medical marijuana side, transitioning into hemp. I support adult use, but my role in cannabis has always been from the social justice, human rights side, medical being access, safe access, and then hemp for me, it's a growing economy, but for me, it's been 20 years of helping on the back end get to this point where with, a large group of people where we can build this into an economy that has $1 trillion economic impact. Hemp also can replace a lot of the things we use oil for. So doing away with petrochemicals will help solve some of the issues we have with water, and figuring all of that. So it's a very broad approach to human rights. And I'm starting to have discussions with my tribe in building a hemp economy there. We have one of our tribal members is in college, actually in Colorado, where I used to live, learning about hemp. But I do work in social equity, and this is literally my whole world is doing workforce development to lift up impoverished communities. And I like to focus on Native American communities, but I'm a board member and co-founder and co-chair of a nonprofit called Indica, which is National Diversity Inclusion Cannabis Alliance. And so with that, we do workforce development in all impoverished communities. I just happen to represent my communities on that board. And, what I see is a lot of, it's interesting what Shannon touched in, and I see this a lot in cannabis and in hemp. It's a new industry. And I not only do I see through the veils, but I kind of sit behind the curtain, and I see a lot of things happening in tribal communities where, it's like that missionary approach where people just kind of go in and they're like, okay, we have this great idea. We're just going to put these businesses in here and we're just going to tell you what to do. And that's not what our communities need. We literally need to be self-sufficient so that we can learn how to develop economic security so that we can just break this poverty cycle. Our communities, most of them were pushed to the outskirts of society so that we couldn't do economic development. We aren't even in this economy yet. When you visit reservations, the level of poverty it's the same thing that I see in Peru, and which is, an underdeveloped nation compared to ours. When you go to, Pine Ridge or some of the Navajo reservations and you see the poverty, it's pretty astounding. And, I've fought against big cannabis coming into some of these places, and unfortunately I've lost because there's so much money being pumped into just coming into our communities in cannabis, because what's happening is so because it's not federally legal yet on the marijuana side, hemp is legal. It's really complicated. I'm trying to make this as short and uncomplicated as possible. If I have a business in Colorado that's a licensed marijuana business, I cannot open in another state because of interstate commerce. So I have to get a license in a new state, and I have to start from ground zero. I just can't expand and file a foreign entity and open up a new business. So what's happening is you have corporations going into Indian country thinking, oh, well, I'm just going to manipulate Indian sovereignty, open up a store and a cultivation center there, hire 10 people from the reservation and call that social equity and economic development. And so I'm actively working on trying to stop that. And there's different versions of how that looks when it comes in. And really the only way to help bring our communities out of the destitution that we're in is to completely empower us and then get out of the way. I mean, we don't even benefit from, I look at like the divisions that we have in our communities over money, over things like casinos, where that's not solving any problems. Where I think of something like hemp, where you can create anything from a plant. You can make fiber, you can make food, you can make housing. There's just so much potential. So what I'm trying to do is just go into these communities and show this potential while I'm competing with big corporations who are trying to say that they're doing the same, but they're not. Unfortunately, sometimes they grab community members from our communities to come in and help open that door. And then they bring in the same bad policies and then go in and, lobby tribal council members, just like they do council members and other people here. Oh yeah, White Plume. Sorry, I saw a comment on Alex White Plume, but this is a really good example of sovereignty versus not being sovereign. And this is a major issue where, we think we have sovereignty over something and we don't. Beyond Alex, I run the risk as a consultant. If I'm consulting businesses on how to open businesses, I'm advising them on something that's federally illegal. So, but I may think I'm safe because I'm advising a sovereign nation. And that's another reason why we see this floodgate of greed coming into sovereign nations, is because these businesses are thinking they're going to be exempt. So it's a tough battle. It's a very depressing fight to have ideas and really, what I told my economic development office at, on our reservation was that it's my intention to help build a business, but it's not my intention to come in and run it. Like I went, I think what we need to do for our communities and what's best, and maybe it's because I'm Chippewa and we are fisher men and women, but is to teach people how to fish and then let them fish the way they know best. And, not try to give them conditions in doing it, because that creates control and fight over scarcity. And we really don't live, our culture doesn't teach us scarcity. We teach abundance. So I can go on and ramble about this, but that's what I do. And it's very challenging.
Thank you for that, Larissa. That was awesome. I think something that people watching might not understand, that behind all of this is the effects of colonialism. All of this is lasting effects from colonialism. The poverty, especially if people don't know Native American history that well, especially since our education system doesn't teach it. Reservations are living in poverty with poor health care. And like Shannon said, the missing and murdered Indigenous relatives is an epidemic on and off reservations. And all of these are modern effects of colonialism, along with things like Larissa was saying, these companies coming in, is modern day colonialism of taking over what little sovereignty that tribal nations have to, again, it's more about the white economy and white prosperity than it is about lives and the well-being of others.
Oh, I've been told that I hate half myself because, my mom's white and I'm pushing out white people from my community. And I'm like, no, not. Just stop. Just stop thinking that way. It's a mindset of superiority, and that you have to tell us what to do all the time. We don't need that. We just stop, just stop. We know how to survive. We did it just fine. We know how to thrive within our communities. Allow us to trade within your economy. give us the opportunity to join the economy and be creative. We can be creative, and we know how to do things without raping and pillaging resources. And ironically, I remember being like 10 years old thinking one day they're going to need to come to us. What, all this destruction is happening, and one day they're going to have to come to us. This is before I even knew any of our prophecies, before I even knew who I was as an Indigenous woman. I just had this epiphany, and then here we are. And yet they're coming to us on how to help, and then they're telling us how to do it. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. Like, you're coming to me for help. This means you get out of the way because you've already destroyed enough. This mindset of control and superiority, of having to have your hands in every little thing, has got to just end. It just has to end. And that is where, behaviorism and psychology comes in. And I have a degree in psychology. And, I do see breakthroughs happening, and social media is doing that, where we're starting to understand narcissism and sociopathic behavior and tendencies and the dark triad of control. And people are starting to be like, wait a minute, I don't like your patronizing attitude. And that's just what I think that's what we need on a fundamental level, is for people to realize who they are as individuals, where they stand in their community, empower them there, and then move our way up. Otherwise, people just are going to constantly be looking for someone to tell them on how to do it. And there's plenty of people waiting to come in. And this is what I see in cannabis, to do that. And they're not good people. And they're drowning out those like myself. I come from an Indigenous background. My white family are working class. So it's not like I have millions and millions of dollars in lobbying money sitting around to be able to get my story out. However, I do have a book coming out, and I did use my savings to pay a ghostwriter to tell my story. I was held hostage. I was being prepared to be taken and sold into sex slavery. As a Native American woman, I escaped. I stabbed myself. I have the police records. I escaped, ran to a fire department, and I helped get, long story short, a lot of this was because of my work in cannabis. There's an epidemic of women being sold into sex slavery in cannabis, as well as Native American women. Being a Native American woman in cannabis kind of made me a target that I couldn't even believe. Didn't even realize that what was happening to me was actually something that happens to the women in my culture. I didn't even like it because I was in the middle of this happening. And this was in 2008 when I escaped. And so, and rebuilt my life and came back. And I have a story for other Native American women, but there's so much competition in my space that my story is getting drowned out because people don't want me to win, because I've been here for so long. They're like, Larissa, 20 years, get out of the way. But we're not here yet. Legalization has not happened. The legacy people like myself, we have not finished our mission in ensuring safe access for everyone and ensuring a true free market, and that this is a plant that should be available to everybody, not another tool for capitalistic control, colonialistic control, because capitalism is not colonialism. Colonialism started like 100 years before capitalism. There is a way to teach people, and I'm a huge fan of microfinance. I studied Mohammed Yunus. I see it. I work within some tribal communities where they practice this, where some of the more wealthier members have somewhat of a bank, and then they give out smaller loans to people. And then just like how microfinance works, and it works. My immigrant family, they're all brown. I mean, my dad's like full-blooded Native American. When they moved here, they had nothing. So what they did is they started pooling whatever little bit they had into creating microfinancing within our own family. And what we do is we just reward behavior. It's so simple psychologically, where someone has a skill set or a service, and then someone has an item, and you just exchange goods and services. And it's just that simple. And then people, when they're rewarded for their behavior and it's good behavior, they want to do more of it. It's just so simple. But the problem is we have really bad people with damaged egos controlling all of it. And it's that colonial mindset of having to take and control all of the resources. And that's an old mindset that I feel like is changing. And just like Shannon said, yes, we have a sense of urgency. And I've sat in meetings where I was a member of 350.org, which is a climate change organization. I was getting my degree in psychology, and I had an elderly woman squeeze my hand. What do we tell the children as we're watching a video telling us the world's going to end if we don't act ASA yesterday? And I'm like, well, we can't panic. I said the same thing. The last thing we can do is panic. They're according, to what I was taught, my people, there's still time, not much, but there's still hope. We just have to change. And how that happens at this point is the individual rewarding the good behavior and really highlighting what's bad with these leaders that just come in, in these political parties that aren't really serving the good of the whole. We need to just strengthen the individual again, because that's how communities work. The United States kind of took community out of individual. That's not how this country was founded. It's not even, how, this whole individualism, how it got so twisted into being selfish is not even how it works. We're supposed to be unified. We're supposed to be working towards some sort of unification to where this whole country works holistically towards a greater good. That's what I have, a master's in policy. That's what I was taught, to do the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. That is the gold standard. How that gets shifted is ego. So if we can just work towards that, and I see social media doing this, I see people calling people out for their just utter disgusting behavior. The Me Too movement. Nobody even knew about what was happening to Native American women until the Me Too movement. Then people are like, oh, wait, you guys are murdered and missing everywhere? Well, duh. Oh, it's related to oil and gas and energy? Well, duh. Well, why? Oh, our country is that corrupt? Yes. And I see this happening. So there's hope. We just have to keep at it. And, this morning I woke up feeling kind of discouraged, and being on this panel helps me see that we are collectively, there is hope, and we are working towards the good. And like Shannon said, we just can't panic. We just have to be kind of like, like a grandma in a way, just really solid and just kind of just moving forward. We know what we have to do. We know what we have to protect. Water, yeah, that's life. And we don't have water, we don't have life. And then we have to protect ourselves, our egos, and teach people how to be good people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Larissa. And I was struck by the fact that you are in that same category of women who have had that experience, and missing and murdered Indigenous folks. But you escaped. Would you like to share that story? That sounds like very powerful to me.
Well, I have a book coming out. The catharsis and editing it has been, something to overcome, that's for sure. But in 2007, I found myself in what I thought was the beginnings, when I say very beginning of a relationship that turned into a hostage situation, where I was being groomed via like phone sex and prescription drugs, because I'm actually a very conservative person. Most Native American women are raised to be that way. Not like conservative, like politically, but like, we're not like out there sexually. And so, I was forced to do that. And it was just 9 months of pure hell. And I was threatened every day with a ball gag and handcuffed. And then one day was, the guy used to try to make me pass out by yelling in my ear or my face till I couldn't breathe and choking me. And I saw a pair of scissors and just thought to stab him, and that maybe if I killed him I could get away. And then for some reason my brain, it's funny how when you're in a panic situation or in a survival mode, the way you think to survive. And I thought, well, if I stab him and not kill him, he will kill me. So I stabbed myself in the sternum, not enough to kill myself, but enough to stun him to run out of the house. And I ran to a fire department. And the guy was part of a larger illicit drug group who was not happy with the work that I was doing and that others were doing. So it's hard to say if it was because I was a Native American. I just happened to be a Native American woman. But then it makes me wonder if if you think about the numbers, it is easier to take Native American and women, that were raised in immigrant families. The statistics show it. I'm not sure how much of it had to do with cannabis versus how much had to do with Native American, but the profundity of it hit me that I survived it when I was writing the book. I hired a ghostwriter. He's a best-selling author, Steve Eggleston. He lives in the UK. He wrote a mystery novel, and which is the reason why I hired him. My mentor was murdered, and I was held hostage around the same time. So there's some correlations, and his death wasn't solved. So this is why I hired a ghostwriter, was because his murder case went cold. And when I ran and escaped, and there's this huge police report, and I was threatened with I was threatened to drop the charges. And there's a law, a federal law, that if women, because women always do this, because we're always threatened in an assault, and 9 out of 10 times, probably more than that, we usually get threatened by the abuser if we press charges and blah blah blah. And so women tend to drop charges. So this is why the federal government came up with a law that if a woman drops charges, the state still has to continue pursuing. The state of Colorado did not pursue. If you read the police records of what happened to me, it is incredible that the state did absolutely nothing about it, and that my mentor's murder went cold. So I wrote a book, and it goes down a political wormhole in the space that I'm in. And, I'm, the fact that I was this close and escape is very haunting for me. To say the least.
And
it's even more haunting that no one did anything about it.
Right. When is your book coming out?
The manuscript is done. I am in the middle of editing it now. So hopefully within the next 3 to 6 months. It's about a year overdue. COVID set us back. And then my own catharsis and, just picking it up and editing it, because there's, it's a story about a drug war. It's still a drug war, regardless whether it's legal or not, or half legal. We're still emerging cannabis at 80 years of prohibition, where brown and Black people were targeted. So the catharsis is pretty intense, but I would say 3 to 6 months. It's going to be called Normal is a Setting. And that's because my whole life as an activist, I've been, asking, why can't my life be normal? And I had a person tell me, and it was the person who actually was responsible for me getting raided, tell me that nothing is normal unless you want to be a washing machine, because normal is a setting on a washing machine. And that just kind of stuck with me, because my life has been anything but normal. I've been wanting to work to help poor communities since I went to Peru with my adopted dad when I was 7, and saw lepers for the first time and couldn't understand. And, my family had, so, they weren't poor. And, I noticed that there was a case system in Peru, and it really bothered me. And it just kind of stuck with me. And then I became an activist in my early 20s, because through medical marijuana, I saw that in the United States, of all countries, that a person only needed one illness to lose everything. Just made me really freak out and become an activist. And then that kind of just sent me into this lane where I'm at now, and doing workforce development and actually doing something with all of my concerns. It took me 20 years to get where I'm at, but I'm actually doing the work. And, that's how I heal, I guess. But thanks for letting me share all of that, because this is really the first time I've even shared in this capacity, that background.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. Shannon, any comments about that? I mean, this is directly in what we're talking about: human rights, the interconnection, the interdependence with all of the other issues, women, everything.
I just told Larissa in the chat, I said, drink some water, drink some water, because, water is our first medicine. And whether it comes in the form of us drinking it, or Larissa with our tears, right? Our tears are healing. And I just want to honor you and say thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that and to take very, very good care of yourself. As you know, as you kind of go throughout the rest of the day, and you know, because even the retelling requires a revisiting, and I was right there with you.
Thank you.
And I want you to know that
Thank you so much.
you know, when we talk about these
Much.
human rights, and we talk about, you know, Larissa said something earlier when she was just that people may not be aware of why, you know, how things come down legally in terms of in this country around rights, right? So I had mentioned that, and she had mentioned Alex Whitebloom, who was fighting to have a hemp farm on Pine Ridge. Talk about economic development. He was fighting to have that hemp farm, not a low THC, wasn't looking at the cannabis as Larissa is, but to really be using that as a hemp product. And because reservations are under federal control, and the federal laws wouldn't require, you know, would require so much for him to do this, that and he kept fighting it, and he never did win it, because there is that kind of control about human rights and economic development. Larissa was talking about that. I'm laughing, Larissa, because I think you said you were from Sault Ste. Marie, right? Your mom is from Sault Ste. Marie, or you're from Sault Ste. Marie? Yeah.
My dad, my
dad.
yeah, I have two. I literally have two Indian dads. How lucky am I?
Yeah,
but actually, I'm very
absolutely.
blessed. I'm very blessed because our cultures are so similar. There's some slight differences, like, you know, my dad, the Incas and the Quechuas, I think, used to sacrifice people. We don't do that. And the Chippewa don't do that. But yeah, my family is Sault Ste. Marie, and we're Bear Clan.
Okay.
McCoy is my last name there. I just went up there recently, several years back, to start meeting everyone, and apparently I'm related to everybody. So it's
That's
a small
what
band.
happens.
Yeah.
You
But
can
it was
you can become your own grandpa. It can happen.
but I love it.
I was a grandma before I was a mom, and that's a, you know, that kind of stuff happens, but I really was. But Larissa, I just wanted to
That's
say,
so awesome.
you know, that you're, you know, that it's so important to have that voice, and that's part of, I don't know all your teachings, but I know you're right across the lake from me, and we're related through that, through our peoples. But the whole thing about being Makwa, about being Bear Clan, is that those are the teachers and the healers. And so you're right where you need to be in terms of, you know, what you're doing in the world, teaching and healing and doing that economic development. But there's those are human rights as well when we think about economic development, because if we cannot support ourselves, again, there's no life, right? So all of the ways in which our rights, we have this illusion that people have rights in this country without recognizing all of the different groupings of people. Callum, certainly in our communities that have chosen different roles than have, that's a whole rights, the rights that we have. And you know, it's no mistake that right now all of those rights are being coming to question, to say, where do you stand? Where do you stand? Because, you know, if our women's bodies, we don't have rights over our own bodies. We don't have, the earth has no rights over its body either. And, you know, these things are all connected. So, yes, I'm so glad you're here, Larissa, and keep raising your voice. And I'm glad you're here physically as well, knowing the danger that you were in for not being here. So, thanks.
I, you know, one last thing, but if I can be a beacon of hope to other women. I mean, I don't know how. I run a nonprofit called Cannabis Consumers Coalition, and we do have someone on our board. We are working on healing, a healing program, and we are using plant medicine based. But I think just having a face to say, hey, it is possible to escape that situation, and then to teach women how to avoid that situation, and that comes down to what the most important thing you're saying is learning how to be self-sufficient and economic security. Had I been more economically secure, I would have never been in the situation that I was in, to even be in a hostage situation, to be kidnapped. None of that would have ever happened. All of that happened 100% because I was desperate.
Yeah. Yep.
So we have to remove that desperation.
So once again, Shannon, we see all of our campaigns and themes intersecting: economic justice, women, human rights, health. What else? Probably all of them.
All of them.
You start thinking about it, right?
Yeah. When you think about it, they are all connected because we're one being. We're one, when we think about that oneness, when we think about, and Larissa, you talked about it, that you said you were aware before you were aware, right? Your very being, you had that awareness at, a young age that, that this is, that we're all part of this whole, right? And so, helping us to understand that and be able to say, yes, what happens to my finger affects my whole hand, right? And being able to do that. So, yep, brick every day. They just keep coming and they just keep intertwining.
Exactly. So well, Callum, do you have other things that you want to bring up today, or shall we move to finish up?
We can definitely move to finish up. I just wanted to thank Larissa and Shannon for sharing today and the emotional labor of talking about these issues.
Right, exactly. So, Larissa, do you want to just give a connection point where people can learn about, you mentioned your nonprofit and other things, we can kind of go around and see and give how people can connect with what each person is doing.
Yes,
So go ahead, Larissa.
Thank you. All my handles on social media is Larissabolivar. So LinkedIn is where I prefer, that's where my professional being is social media wise. Facebook is my political sounding board. So if you really want to get to know my thoughts, it's a good one. And then, those are the two that I pretty much stay on. And then cannabisconsumer.org for the website for the nonprofit. But yeah, LinkedIn would probably, at Larissabolivar, LinkedIn is the best way to reach me. I try to stay on there. It keeps me out of trouble.
That sounds good. And Shannon.
Right. I think, well, there's a couple of ways, but I really want people to come to the we.net and look at the campaign for interdependence and see how they can get involved. You can find me there. You can also find me on social media, just my name, nothing fancy. So across different platforms. I've just recently put my toe into Instagram, but it's kind of scary. So I don't know if I'm going to leave my toe in there or not. But definitely LinkedIn and Facebook. And as Larissa said, if you really want to get to know me, and know my thoughts, I'm pretty transparent about what I think. And but I want to invite people to find ways that they can get involved because everything's connected, right? So if you have a passion for, sometimes people call them rights, I call them human responsibilities, that if this is your passion and you really want to be able to have a voice or elevate something or be able to support something that is happening out there, to come to we.net and get involved, right?
Yeah, definitely. And since you are We the World's coordinator for Interdependence, it's very appropriate that you talk about it. And in particular, this idea of conscious interdependence, I feel, is very important. So this way that people can understand that when they are shopping or voting or listening to their media choices, or what media they support, what platforms, all of that has a ripple effect that affects everyone. So it's being conscious of your interdependence that I think is one of the important goals of the interdependence campaign that you are coordinating, right,
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes, definitely raising our consciousness, just like this is doing right here. Some people, there's a lot of people that are both within this country and throughout the world that don't know about these issues, that don't, have never heard of what has happened or is happening in our tribal communities, or, so this is another way where we kind of, give voice to that and elevate that. And definitely, Rick, to think about, what is this product that I'm wearing and what are the human rights behind the making of this product? And I think just raising every time we start to ask those questions. I heard this this quote one time by the Clue Train Manifesto, it was called, and it said, "The questions we ask determine the future." The questions we ask determine the future. So if I ask this question about where this piece of clothing came and what were the hands that created it, when I have that medicine, how was that medicine, harvested, and and the product, all those things are important questions to ask. And the more that we ask them, the more we shift what happens. So ask a beautiful question, right?
That sounds like a beautiful idea. And Callum, and also Callum, can you also give people a sense of other things that are happening today that you're involved with?
Yep. So I dropped the link to our webpage schedule in the chat on here and Facebook. But at 3 p.m., I will be releasing my program called Rethinking Community that focuses on the LGBTQ+, BIPOC, and disabled communities. And then at 4, 5, and 6 p.m., all in Eastern Time, there will be reruns of our How to Be an Ally series focusing on the LGBTQ+ community. And it'll have our 3 episodes that we have so far. And those will just be on Facebook, but the 3 p.m. will be on our Zoom line and Facebook, which you can find both on the 11 Days of Global Unity.org schedule.
Okay, that sounds great, and a lot to look forward to. The rest of the panels that are coming up, we've got some very exciting panels coming up. Tomorrow is the Day for Freedom, and we have facing the crisis of freedom and democracy in the United States with Rabbi Michael Lerner and Peter Gable. We have also tomorrow, that one I just mentioned is at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. At 4 p.m. Eastern Time, we have political polarization and the future of freedom and democracy. So that's another powerful one. And we, every day is really amazing. So You can watch the replays of all of these. Just connect through to we.net. You'll see the upcoming schedule, and then see the replays as well. We have Jonathan Granoff featured talking about human security and the relationship of that to disarmament for our Disarmament Day, which is Monday the 20th. And then peace, we have a wonderful lineup with Terry Angel Miller, with Fumi and Dr. Marty K. Casey and Karen Palmer, and so many wonderful speakers, and all of these campaigns go all year long. So to get connected in, just go to we.net. So I think we accomplished what we'd like to do on each of these broadcasts, right? To inspire, inform, and involve. 3 I's that make a we, so we can go from a me-based society to a we-based society. Thank you all so much. This has been great. Thank you.